Look, I joke about how I can definitely make a skeleton sexy, but unfortunately in our current year, this is no longer a hot take. Thanks for the sexy skeleton rep, Toby Fox, really do appreciate that. But that didn't stop One Piece from releasing a scene like this all the way back in 2011. One Piece was ahead of its time in, many ways, I guess. So go figure. But seriously, time to stop picking around the bone and actually get into the meat of who we're talking about here. Oh, but wait a minute. The character we're talking about has no meat. He may be meatless, but he's certainly not boneless. He's a character that constantly makes me yell, "Let's go, Grandpa," and is quite possibly the funkiest member of the crew, competing only with Frankie if I'm to be honest. He's the king of rock, the king of soul, and is the coolest bone daddy out there. Our favorite skeleton, and my favorite skeleton, it's the magnificent musician of the Strawhats, Brook. Speaking in all honesty, Brook goes so hard, and the pun was not intended there. How many 90-year-old skeletons do you know that can take down a whole group of fellow pirates and thieves in the span of seconds with a single sword strike? I can only imagine this man laughs in the face of the Grim Reaper, because he's literally been to hell and back, and that shit means nothing to him now. The cold hand of death is only cold to those of the living, and Brook's so cold he laughs it off. His whole concept rocks, and I must commend Oda for creating a guitar shredding skeleton, cause how is that not the coolest thing you've ever seen? Bonus points for the fact he's an old man who could not give a shit about most enemies around him. No, but really, Brook as a character with who he is and what he represents is honestly really beautiful. I don't know where Oda was mentally when he made this man, but Brook feels like someone made with emotion first and character importance second. We'd obviously been teased with the addition of a musician for years, with Luffy desperately wanting one, and it all came together in such a satisfying way with Brook. It only makes sense to me that Brook is made with a lot of emotional depth and intelligence right out the gate, because his whole being centers around music. I cannot think of anything more human, more wonderful, and more emotional than music. Brook, more than anyone, needed to be a character larger than life, and Oda certainly delivered in that regard. I also find it especially funny he was introduced during this Nightmare Before Christmas inspired arc. This arc in itself being filled with music, if the zombie disco is anything to go by. God, I love One Piece. I think the themes that surround Brook are some of the most beautiful and melancholic themes to surround a character, helping to tie him to the other Straw Hats immediately upon recruitment. And he's certainly worth the discussion for how he's been set up, struck down, and set up all over again. But before we do that, it's sponsor time. While we cannot all be pirates in our current day and age, we can still be pirates online, and we can do that safely with Atlas VPN. If you're not a tech nerd like me and have no idea what a VPN is, a VPN makes it so all your internet searches, browsing, and history is completely protected. It's sure to hide your IP address, and it keeps you safe from spying, especially from the pesky FBI agent in your computer who's watching you look up Zoro's big fat boobies as we speak. But Atlas VPN isn't just a VPN, it also protects you from pop-up ads and malicious malware. It can also give you access to any country's version of Netflix or Disney Plus. I mentioned Disney Plus specifically because did you guys know that the entirety of Bleach is on Australian Disney Plus? And with Atlas, you, yes, you, can take advantage of Atlas's summer deal discount. You can get a 3-year subscription from $1.83 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Even better than that, if you use my link in the description below, you get an 85% discount for premium subscription. Snatch that deal while it's hot, and thank you so much Atlas VPN for sponsoring this video. I won't let you down. And it's back to the funny bone man. Alright, so straight up, I think Brook is insane. He has the ongoing panty joke, and I know a lot of people don't quite get the point of this joke, but I think the point is he's just a bit crazy. But also, the image of a skeleton asking to see panties is definitely an insane one, and Brook is 100% insane. Honestly, out of all the Straw Hats, Brook is definitely the most mentally unwell one. And who can blame him? This old man has been through a lot, so I think I can grant him panty forgiveness with how broken his non-existent brain is. And how much has Brook gone through? Well, if you know, you know. But do not fear, we will be discussing it. So get those whale-sized tissues ready, because this funny bone man is known to have one of the most tragic pasts to be written. Brook is certainly an emotional peak in One Piece's story, but before I do touch on that, I want to talk about Luffy's obsession with demanding a musician. From the get-go, Luffy puts prominence on the fact his crew needs a musician. He even puts the needs of a musician over the needs of a doctor, and every time he says this, the crewmates around him tell him this isn't a necessity. But as much as this can be seen as a bit, and as selfish as Luffy can be in his needs, it made perfect sense to me. Pirates and music go hand in hand. Historically, they always have. And Luffy finding music to be essential is a good showing of his character. After all, Luffy's whole being is loud and joyful. He's a character who runs on pure instinct and emotion, and he's someone who cares very deeply for his crew's happiness and morale. And what boosts a crew's morale more than music? What's the point of sitting around a fire or sitting on the ship's deck if there's no music to sing or dance to? Music can be a pure embodiment of joy, has always worked to lift one's spirits. And in future chapters, we also discover Luffy has his own personal connection with music through Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates. The songs he'd heard Shanks' crew play left a huge impression on him, to the point he decided a musician was the most essential of all crew members needed. Luffy is also a somewhat musical character, singing his famous Moron song within Skypiea as he trudges through the forest alone. This in itself shows Luffy is someone who seems to hate the quiet, someone who needs noise when he's alone. So even if it's a stupid song, he sings. What I'm saying is, there's a reason we are given the importance of a musician from the start. Not only is music an important part of being a pirate, it's an important part of Luffy. And so, Brook's introduction needed to be something colorful and wacky and powerful to fit with Luffy himself. And it's these kinds of intricacies that make me happy someone like Oda is writing One Piece. Because the power of music is not something that should ever be underestimated. And Oda seems to understand that fully, which is why to have a character that's about the human soul, about life and about death, and to connect him to music is such a genius conception that has me appreciating Brook and the character writing of this series on a whole other level. These are all themes of human nature, Brook's entire creation being a questioning and showing of the determination of human nature for a single person and with outside connection, which is what makes his story so heartbreaking, or, well, bone-shattering if we're talking about Brook. So, let's actually get into Brook's character and let's discuss why I like this bony Soul King so much. From the second we meet him, it's quite obvious death surrounds Brook. From the zombies in Thriller Bark, to the haunted castle and ships, to his shadow being taken, which can be a symbolism of his soul due to how the shadows worked, to the fact he's a literal walking skeleton. We are always reminded of death whenever we look at Brook. He's kind of existential in that way. But with him being a dead man walking, there's also this idea of him being stuck in the past of his previous life. And I'll get to that in a moment. When Luffy first meets Brook, he immediately wants him on the crew, to which Brook says yes, just to back up and then decline afterwards. Why did this happen? Well, probably because Brook was painfully lonely, and perhaps being asked to join a crew looking the way he did made him ridiculously happy. Unfortunately, he had other priorities to attend to, ones we didn't know of until Brook encounters Robin and Frankie. This whole scene is actually one of my favorites. From Frankie's questions to Brook's response. And I think the most important line is when Frankie questions Brook's motives.
喋る骸骨だぞ。そんな気味悪いやつに友達なんかできるわけねえ。異形の者は弾かれる。
フランキー、あなた何を？
おめえ、死にてえほど寂しかったって言ってただろう。俺がおめえなら、とうに命なんか絶ってる。
Frankie sounds like he's being rude here, but we need to remember Frankie and Robin's own origins. They're both freaks as well, two people who have been ostracized since birth. So Frankie is just speaking from experience. Frankly, there's probably no one better to talk to Brook about this. This reads to me as Frankie looking out for Brook and letting him know he won't find anyone better than Luffy. The line, "Didn't you say I got so lonely I wanted to die?" is Frankie worrying about Brook being lonelier still out on the ocean. If anything, he's confused why Brook wants to venture out into the world after declining Luffy's invitation. And I see all of this as freaks looking out for freaks. But then we get to Brook's response, and we get a look into the heartbreaking mindset that this funny bone man has found himself in.
私になぜ彼がもう待ってやしないと見切りをつける権利がありますか？身勝手な約束をして声も届かぬ遠い空から死んでごめんじゃないでしょうに。
These are very powerful lines, and we've found that Brook does not see death as an apology. He's placed the duty of getting to Laboon, of everyone's deaths in his crew, on his own shoulders, which is tragically sad. That's a lot of pressure to put on a single person, and it seems the only reason he hasn't really tried to end his own life yet is due to the duty of getting to Laboon. Brook is still alive, but he isn't living. And this is where we see he's stuck in the past. For him, the past clearly has happier times. His current existence is due to the past, and he's walking with the ghosts of his previous crew pulling him along. At this point, Brook may as well be an empty shell, with both his shadow missing and his own life being previously lived. He doesn't see this new existence as a second chance, instead sees it as a way to get to Laboon and Laboon alone. In fact, it's like he almost feels guilty for outliving his crew, perhaps sees this as a massive burden, and it's here we discover the importance of connections with crew in Brook's life. How can he possibly up and join a new crew when his old one is dead and gone? I believe Brook sees this as something selfish, sees it as a betrayal to his old captain and his old crew, and especially sees it as a betrayal to Laboon. This is why, just because Luffy knew of Laboon and declared Laboon his own crewmate, this still wouldn't have been enough for Brook's acceptance. There's still a past Brook is clinging to, a prior captain he still pledged his own loyalty to, and really, what else to do in this situation but use this second life as a way to honor your perished friends? It's an extremely mentally straining situation to be put in, especially considering Brook already sees his life as lived. He is an old man at this point after all, and it'd be like Rayleigh pledging himself to a new captain after Roger's death. I understand why Brook would see it as a disrespect, and it's why Brook feels he doesn't have a right to wonder if Laboon is still waiting for them or not. At this point, he isn't allowed to wonder in Laboon's faith, because he sees it as his own fault for testing Laboon's faith. It's not fair on him to question Laboon's loyalty, and it's not fair on him to even consider death an option when Brook clearly views it as a cowardly justification for Laboon's pain. There is no life Brook is living here. The only thing he's experiencing is guilt. So how do you break an old man of his old ways? How can you possibly pull Brook away from this tremendous burden of outliving outliving his friends and crew, being the only one left to seek out Laboon in this daunting ocean. Well, the Straw Hats didn't really do this on purpose, the saving of Brook's soul and shadow being only due to Zoro's fascination with Zuma. Brook saw tremendous strength in Zoro through this fight, and I find it no coincidence it was specifically Brook who got to see this duel, because on the surface, this fight Zoro has with Zuma speaks of selfish means. Zoro wanted to fight a cool samurai, he wanted a cool sword, and that's exactly what he got. But for some reason, Brook and Zoro seem to have this connection upon first meeting, and it's very possible it's due to Zoro being stuck in his own version of the past. After all, Zoro is doing everything he's doing for Kuina, the best friend who perished before him, and it holds a resemblance to Brook's own story. Zoro got to outlive a person he looked up to, and now he shoulders the promise of becoming a great swordsman for Kuina. But in that sense, he's also made a promise to his captain, and we've even seen Zoro put his life on Luffy multiple times, which is a very strong showing of Zoro's loyalty in Luffy while also not disrespecting Kuina's death and promise. Put simply, Zoro is living his life under a captain he's found to be worthy, while also continuing to uphold his promise to Kuina. Zoro has found a way to live for himself and others while still cherishing the memory of Kuina, and this is the exact question and answer Brook is trying to find for himself. Is he able to live the life he now has, happily and freely, without dishonoring the deceased crew before him? It's an answer Zoro has managed to find for himself and Kuina, and Brook is discovering Zoro's strength of character through the relationship he's gained through the Straw Hats. This situation is one that continues to plague Brook throughout Thriller Bark, as, with as lonely as he is, he doesn't find it a necessity to make any new friends. Once again, it's in a similar way Zoro didn't either until joining the Straw Hats. There's strength in relationship and friendship is power and all that. It's a shonen anime, what do you expect? The only thing is, Brook isn't looking for strength. He still very much differs with Zoro's own situation, because Zoro needed that extra push to really be the best. With a captain to be loyal to and a crew to protect, Zoro found even more motivation to become the world's greatest swordsman. So why would Brook join a crew just to find strength? What could he possibly find in a new crew that his previous crew didn't already give him? I won't spoil that yet, because there's still more we need to look at before getting to that answer. Specifically, what we need to look at is the thing that really pulled Brook towards the Straw Hats. The defining moment that had Brook realizing this wasn't just a crew of individuals who work on their own, but this is a crew who found a connection in each other like no one else, and will do anything for that connection. This moment, of course, is when Zoro and Sanji try to sacrifice themselves for the sake of Luffy and each other. And once again, it's something Brook sees Zoro doing first, because these lines were so carefully written in how Zoro presents his deal to Kuma. When Zoro bargains with Kuma for Luffy's head, he doesn't say he'll give up on his dream. Instead, Zoro says he will become the world's greatest swordsman, in the same way Luffy will become the Pirate King. And there's a total understanding here of Zoro tying his life to his goals as he always has. Sanji sees this differently though, and wants to sacrifice himself to make sure Zoro actually reaches this status. At this point, Sanji is giving up his own dream for the sake of Zoro and Luffy, as we see him do again in future arcs. Zoro responds by knocking Sanji out, possibly due to the fact he refuses to let Sanji die by putting Zoro's life and dream above his own. And then we get to the dreaded pain bubble. But what's important is after everything plays out, when Sanji wakes up to find Zoro's swords next to him, because we discover Brook had been watching this entire exchange the whole time. Bro was absolutely flabbergasted. What did Brook see during this exchange? Well, Think about it. As previously explained, just like Brook, Zoro has a past he is forever tied to. Wado binds him to Kuina and his childhood promise. But Zoro didn't see sacrificing himself for Luffy and Sanji as breaking that promise. Brook sees Zoro proudly declare he will become the best swordsman, even with the promise of death at his door, and watches as both Zoro and Sanji refuse to let the other ones surrender themselves. Brook's discovering this crew, the Strawhats, prioritize everyone's dreams together. He's seeing that their pasts are not being discarded nor forgotten, but are being respected in this connection they've all found within each other. But of course, Brook doesn't know of either of their pasts at this point, but it doesn't really matter, because from what I know, to have a dream, you need to have a past that inspired said dream. So this is a total respect and loyalty of crewmates, friends, and family that Brook is watching unfold. And don't just take my word for it. Brook quite literally tells Sanji how the scene he saw moved him completely.
少し話戻りますけど、実は私も見ちったのです。お二人の行動に心打たれました。仲間っていいですね。
He tells Sanji how amazing it is to have crewmates, essentially, and Sanji is understandably a bit sheepish about it because they're talking about Zoro and he doesn't care about that guy or anything, whatever. But, you know what really settles the deal here? You know what really makes me cry? Right after he asks Sanji for a song suggestion, comically not actually taking one, what song does he break out in directly after talking about camaraderie and crewmateship with Sanji?
じゃあそうだな。
よほほほよほほほ
Bink's booze. Oh boy, do we need to get into the significance of what Bink's booze means to Brook. So keep this information locked away so you can cry with me as we get into Brook's bittersweet, tragic past. And before I really do dive in, let me get one thing straight. Oh my god, did Brook's backstory suck. And not suck as in it was terribly, horribly bad, but suck as in, wow, I want to light myself on fire and jump off a building because that's the saddest shit I've ever heard. What we see through Brook's past is his former crew, his captain, and Laboon. But what we see all the time, and what we hear, in the anime at least, is music. Brook's old crew was extremely musical, which is something that also connects him to Laboon, as Laboon absolutely loved these tunes. But what song do they play the most? Bink's Booze, of course. When we translate the lyrics of this song, we discover it's about the joys of being a pirate. It's about sailing the world, finding new seas, and finding closure in how there'll always be another tomorrow, and how everyone met on the sea will forever be connected under the moonlit ocean. It's a gorgeous song filled with a lot of wanderlust, but it is especially about the relationships everyone finds on the seas that are never forgotten as they continue their journey across the ocean. For multiple reasons, this obviously connects with Brook, especially as we see Brook's crew was struck with what I find to be the most realistic and heart-wrenching tragedy that we could see strike a pirate crew. They caught the plague. It's not explicitly stated it's the Black Plague or anything, but it was obviously a life-threatening disease that spread from person to person. Brook was already forced to leave Laboon due to the dangerous seas, and now he's forced to leave his original captain in a very emotional farewell, as the original ship essentially becomes a plague ship. So already, from Laboon's leaving to half of the crew parting ways, Bink's booze keeps Brook connected to his family. But tragedy befalls Brook again when the remainder of his crew are hit with poisonous arrows. Another harrowingly realistic way for pirates to go. And the realism in this story is really what gets you by the throat, because there was nothing flashy or noble or spectacular about these deaths. They were just incredibly unlucky, struck by plague and poison. The final connection Brook has with Bink's booze is solidified as they all play until their last dying breath. This scene so heartbreaking as we watch each person slowly drop throughout the song, but it's what Brook says at the very end. His own final words of this life that really ruins me.
Zoro! なんです。伴奏だけ残して。
Look, not to get incredibly sappy about this, but music is made to be loved and shared. It can be gratifying to play on your own, but it opens a whole new world when playing to an audience or playing together. The accompaniment, as Brook states, is a part to be played with someone. His chords are struck not to lead, but to join another. So even as Brook is about to reach his second life, with this first one ending, it already shows the loneliness he's about to experience. It shows his music is to be played with people, that his songs are empty if it's just him alone. And that's the true tragedy of this entire thing. Because as we see Brook alone on his ship, he hallucinates of seeing his crew. He pretends he's happy by himself to try and dull the pain, but there's something he isn't doing that sticks out like a sore thumb. He isn't playing anything. Because he can't. He sings from time to time, possibly when he's at his loneliest, but he doesn't touch his violin or his piano through these horrible years. Because what would make him feel lonelier than the accompaniment playing on its own? Isn't that the most excruciating sadness you could ever imagine? You can't even play the music you love that connects you to your deceased crew because it would only remind you of how lonely you truly are. And now let's cycle back around. From what we know, Brook hasn't played anything since his time of being a skeleton. He's forever kept the recording of his crew to show Laboon, but he hasn't touched an instrument himself since then, due to the pain this would put him through. But after seeing Zoro and Sanji's sacrifice, after seeing the Strawhats' connection take him aback like anything he'd ever seen before, what does he do? He plays. And what does he play? He plays Bink's booze. Brook is so overwhelmed by the love he finds in the Strawhats, so amazed by this attachment, that he cannot help but joyously play the one song that connects himself to his own prior crew. And as Frankie pulls out a guitar and as everyone sings along with him, he's no longer the lonely accompaniment that he'd found himself to be for decades before this. And what really hammers this in, what really shows us Brook has finally found some solace from those torturous years of solitude, is what he screams after Luffy tells him Laboon is still alive and waiting for him.
私生きててよかった本当に生きててよかった
そらそうだ
I'm so glad to be alive. This is a man who wished for death, who was in a situation where death would be better than the torture he went through. But he couldn't, because his duty led him to believing dying would be a poor excuse for what he's put Laboon through. Yet, after all these years, after decades of suffering from loneliness, he yells, "I'm so glad to be alive." He's gained back this sense of wanting to live. Metaphorically and literally, his soul has come back to him. And this is what the Strawhats gave him that his old crew gave him as well. It was that joy of living. Yes, he was alive for Laboon, but he was forever trapped under the weight of his past. Brook was never living in the present once gaining this second life. Always believed it to be selfish to even try and move on due to what happened to his former crew and captain. But he's realized now this isn't the case. He's found a crew that will respect his past and his dreams like no other. Laboon becoming part of the Strawhats was a total coincidence, but it was a push he needed to realize means no one would hold it against him to keep enjoying life. And this is the power that music has on Brook and has on this entire series. Brook is even so connected to Bink's boos that his own laugh is a literal melodic line from the song, showing the joy he has in and through music. And of course, Brook very much cherishes the connections he now has with the Strawhats. Even as he was separated from them for 2 years, he continued to play as a rock star in stadiums and concerts, possibly hoping the Strawhats would hear this music to forever remind them of their family. Also, Brook's time skip design was a fantastic showing of how he's no longer stuck in the past, discarding the clothes he'd literally died in for brighter colors and more modern instruments, such as an electric guitar. The Strawhats have allowed him to finally move on, and he's finding new sounds that the Strawhats inspire him to play. We also see how ride or die he is when helping save Sanji in Whole Cake Island, telling Big Mom that Sanji is a kind man, and once he's determined to sacrifice himself for someone else, he'll stick to it. And the reason Brook knows this is because he literally watched it happen in Thriller Bark. This scene's so prominent to him that he remembers it even years later. But then Brook continues and says something that shows the real compassion he has for his crew.
最悪の結果、サンジさんが戻らないと決断したとき、彼が自分を責めないように。私たちはこの旅で大きなものを得たと言えるように。いただきます、ロード・ポーネグリフ。
This line holds a lot of significance because, for years, Brook spent time alone blaming himself for the downfall of his prior crew. After all, he became the new captain of the separated shipmates, and they perished due to means outside of his control. But the guilt would not let him move on, until discovering the Strawhats, and realizing this second chance he's been given was for living for the sake of himself and Laboon. Brook understands more than anyone how it feels to blame yourself for the danger you've put your family in, and Brook would rather face an emperor than allow Sanji to suffer that kind of self-inflicted torture. What I'm saying is, Brook's a real one, and this love of his crew extends to Robin during Wano as well, as he refuses to allow anyone to see her devil form, knowing this isn't how Robin wants her family to see her. Also, Robin and Brook just have an incredibly sweet dynamic, so I couldn't be happier that we got these touching moments during such a big arc. To sum this all up, and I think a good question to end this on is, why have I titled this video Brook and Life? Brook has a great connection with death, and Brook's story very well could be interpreted as how to healthily grieve your loved ones in the past. His story brings up the themes of immortality and losing those around you. But Brook's curse wasn't just immortality. It was the curse of having immortality with the past you're forced to remember, which is, of course, what made him so lonely. Yet, despite all this, Brook still got a second chance and found a way to use it. Brook's growth and development comes from simply being with the Strawhats, but most importantly, it comes from enjoying life. While Brook's story can indeed be about the tragedy of death, it is now, in my opinion, about the joys found in life. Brook wants to see new things, sail new seas, and laugh with his newfound family, all for the sake of himself and Laboon. Even in the most dire of situations, Brook shakes it off with his iconic laugh, because God forbid he's alive, and he will enjoy it. Even though he has a painful past full of bittersweet memories, he's still connected to it through his music. Bink's Boos is, no doubt, about connecting the past with the present, but more importantly, it's about connecting family, both new and old, together, through the seas and throughout time. Ultimately, there's a lot of humanity in Brook's story and character, and connecting him to music in such a powerful way shows the emotional depth this series really has. I love watching Brook just live his life with the Strawhats now, because at this point, he's just the insane grandpa who only wants the best for you. He's certainly a character I wasn't expecting to love as much as I do, but the Strawhats definitely do not feel complete without him. And with that, thanks for watching. Quick, before I end the video, what is a skeleton's favorite snack?
Reds!
Spare ribs!
Sorry, I couldn't find anywhere else to put that clip and I needed to put it somewhere in the Brook video or I would have gone crazy. I hope you guys liked this one. Brook was a lot to cover considering he has a very heavy past, but I hope I did him justice and I hope all you little music nerds out there love Brook as much as I do. Tell me why Brook's story shattered you as much as it shattered me because, as always, I love reading the comments and I love hearing what you all have to say. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you would like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and watching and sharing these videos does more than you can imagine for me. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!